Before this podcast, we would like to give a massive thanks to Keith at KMR Audio, who has provided us with all the equipment we have needed to launch our podcast.
Keith has hooked us up with some premium equipment, and if you're in the market yourself for some high-end audio recording equipment, then head over to kmraudio.com.
The balls are shown. The balls are shown. The balls are shown.
Hello and welcome to the Bull Sessions, a podcast where we delve into the lives and stories of successful millennials. My name's Tom West. I'm joined here today by Ross Jeffries.
Hello, Tom.
And Henry Martin.
Hello, Tom.
And for session 2, we're massively excited to be joined by Jesse Wilson, co-founder of Jubël Beer. Jesse, how are you today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Thank you for coming. So the first thing we should do, I think, is if you could explain just briefly about the company, about the business. What do you do? What do you sell?
For sure, yeah. Well, you introed it as having successful millennials, so I'm surprised already that you've got me in. But yeah, Jubël was it's an idea that my mate and I, Tom, came up with whilst we were at university. Tom and I met sort of Freshers Week, as you do. Kind of turned up at my door with a six-pack of beers and FIFA, and we were mates ever since. And it was final year ski trip where we came up with the idea for Jubël, where essentially we came across a local beer tradition out in the Alps called demi-pêche, where peach lager is quite a thing, and they do it by just adding peach cordial to a pint of lager. And Tom and I just noticed everyone out there drank it, kind of all the way from 18-year-olds up to 80-year-olds. It was guys and girls. There was kind of no one who didn't like this thing called demi-pêche. And it was when we came back to the UK, we brought the cordial with us. And we just took it to house parties and pre-drinks and made demi-pêche just for ourselves to drink. And it was when loads of people were asking us, what are you doing? What are you making there? And trying it, where they said, that's delicious. That I wish a brand existed like that over here. And Tom and I just thought, well, why don't we do it ourselves? And that's sort of where the idea for Jubël came from, and why we decided to go for it.
So the thing that I am kind of interested in is, like, were you massively into beer before you came up with this idea, or was it just kind of really spontaneous, like, this is nice, let's make this?
No, I think that's the hilarious thing about it, because in our group of friends, I've probably got the reputation for being the worst boozer going. I'm the Artful Dodger, they often call me. So, yeah, me and beer never used to go together that well. I'd always have something like a cider black to make it as easy to drink as possible. Yeah. And Tom was relatively similar, but because I was worse at drinking than him, he kind of got off the hook. Really? But Tom would often have a lager and lime, so it's quite fitting that me and Tom would end up doing something that wasn't just a normal beer, because neither of us could really drink normal beer. Yeah. But yeah, I had a very brief experience in the beer world with a company called AB InBev, who own brands like Corona, Beck, Stella, Budweiser, and did a summer internship with them and worked for Heineken briefly over a summer as well. Okay. So had a little bit of beer experience, but nothing to the extent of starting a new
Arguably
brand.
not enough to just go, let's, well, why not? Let's create our own beer.
Yeah, not at all. No, I sat on a computer all summer basically doing spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's not...
Didn't prepare you at all.
Not
for doing
hands-on,
anything
is
in
it,
the
with the
real
beer?
world.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Right, so Jesse, just kind of looking at the brand kind of in general at the start then, who would you say kind of your typical consumer would be, or kind of your target audience when you're looking to sell Jubël?
I think we had some assumptions around that at the start, and the best thing we did was we just made 5,000 bottles initially, which we used the rest of our student loans to make, but felt like that was the most beer we could ever make. And quite quickly realised in the grand scheme of things it's not much, but we used that just to go along to as many festivals as we could, sort of music festivals, food festivals, beer festivals. And instead of sitting down too long and planning who's the perfect consumer, we just sold beer and wanted to see who buys it, who doesn't, what do they say about it, who likes it. And instead of sitting in a focus group and getting people to over-intellectualize, what do you think of this product, we just observe like reactions. You can tell whether someone likes something or they don't. You can see them walk back to a a group of people there with and either put it on the side and not touch it again, or pass it around the group and say, you can read their face and say, oh, that's really nice. And from that, we were really able to gauge who is our consumer. Yeah. And for us, it's 25 to 35. It's a real even split between guys and girls, because the product is a little bit sweeter than a normal beer. Like, if we're playing to stereotypes, girls like it a lot more than they do normal beer. Mm-hmm. And then because it's still got the beer base to it and it's not like a flavoured cider, there's not sort of that stigma around it. And guys are still interested because it's got the beer aspect to it.
Exactly. Yeah, because I personally hate cider. It's just too sweet for me. But drinking that, because we've all had now on our third, for those of you obviously that can't see at home, we're on
Since
our third.
We started the show.
By the end of it, it's going to be an absolute shambles. But yeah, it's actually, like you say, it's quite a mix, because it even says on the back of the bottle, it's sort of a peach beer in between the boring beer and a super sweet cider. So that is sort of an all-encompassing beer, you could say. And so when you went to these festivals, did you actually sort of get back from people? Was it mainly positive, or was there some that went, don't bother, almost?
Yeah, I think like anything, if you're doing something that's a bit different and something that people aren't used to, you're going to get your haters in there as well. Yeah. And if we just went with a normal lager that was similar to everything else you get, we probably wouldn't have got any reactions. You're not really going to get lovers because it's like, well, it's just lager. Yeah. But people know what they're in for when they're in for a lager. So because we were doing something that was quite different and it's something that people haven't really come across before, often the first response is surprise. So guys will often say, the most common feedback we get from guys is like, that's actually really well balanced. I thought that was going to be really sweet and sickly. And then the most common feedback we get from girls is, that's actually really nice. I really don't like beer, but I didn't think I'd like that, but I really do. So it kind of has a perception around it where people don't think they're going to like it, but the reality is quite different. But in and amongst that, you definitely get people who don't like it. And I remember the funniest bloke ever was, we were at this Sky Bar event in Croyd, and I was sampling some people at the event, and this guy said, "Oh my goodness, that's the worst thing I've ever had." He was like, and he didn't stop there. He was like, you must have the worst job in the world trying to push this stuff. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, you couldn't give that away. That is awful." And he was a little bit older. He wasn't quite in the target market. So yeah, I took the first couple of blows and then had a slide jab back and just said, "Well, to be fair, mate, you are a bit older than our target market." He was like, "You calling me old?" I was like, "Yeah, a little bit."
When you say about the perception of someone almost not wanting to drink a drink that you're trying to give them because you want them to test it, what did you do to get around those perceptions that, oh, I'm not going to like it, I don't want to drink it?
Yeah, I think a couple of key things. One thing we've done so far, and then another thing that we're working on doing at the minute. The one thing we've done so far is widespread sampling, like just literally getting people to try it. That's the best way, because once people try it, as I said, they do sort of change their view on it and they really like it. So we sampled over 20,000 people over the summer down in Cornwall. And that was our main marketing activity. We just went aggressive on the sampling and tried to get as many people trying it as possible. And then the second thing that we're doing, which is what we're working on at the minute, is how we communicate that on and off pack. Because you see at the moment on the bottle, it just says peach beer. And we found when people read peach beer, they often go, "Oh, peach beer, that sounds weird. Yeah. That sounds disgusting." Okay. And that's the thing that sort of puts people off. And we sort of link, the perception piece to that. So we're doing a bit of branding work at the moment to look at what's out there and look at other brands that have maybe done something that's against the grain in the category that they're in. And just looked at how have they kind of overcome some hurdles with communicating the fact they've got a product that's really different, but do that in a way that really drives appetite appeal rather than kind of alienates people and puts them off. And as an example, a brand like Oatly, it's oat milk, and people sort of like, what is oat milk? And Oatly on the side of their bottle, it's like milk but made for humans, and it's just subtle tones around how they communicate what their product is in a way that calls it out, but sort of drives a bit of curiosity and intrigue as well. So we haven't got there yet. We're still working on that, but by Easter time we'll be we'll be rolling out some new branding work with that in mind.
Right, it's interesting. And also, kind of looking at the branding side of it, what inspired the name Jubël?
So rather cheesily, similar to how you might have a holiday song or a summer song that just reminds you of something. There is a song called Jubël that it was really popular when we went on that uni ski trip.
Okay.
So they would always play it in all the bars and après bars. And when Tom and I were back, actually, it was a year after we finished uni. We were catching up over a pint, and we were just in the pub, and there's a song called Jubël that came on in the pub, and it just got back round to talking about the ski trip, and we were like, oh, do you remember that beer idea we had? Why didn't we do anything about that? And after a couple more pints, we were starting to get quite excited about, actually, we're in a pub here, there's nothing like demi-pêche. It's definitely a gap in the market. Let's do something about it. And when we were thinking about names a couple of weeks later, we just looked up what Jubël meant, and it meant a feeling of joy. And we were like, actually, that's perfect for the sort of brand that we wanted to create.
Yeah.
And then covered off a couple of practical points, like, is the domain free and has someone trademarked it within beer? So, yeah, we just went for it, and then registered the company, and there was kind of no turning back from that point. So, yeah, just kind of dove in.
Can you sing the song?
No.
There was a moment's hesitation where you nearly went for it.
Instrumental.
You nearly went for it.
I was really interested because I was reading the blog, which is like one of the best set out blogs I've actually seen, because it's so kind of like short and snappy, but you get through the story really well. And I was really interested in like your thought process behind leaving your grad scheme to start this, because I'm not in anywhere near the same kind of situation, but I've sort of had the same idea that you wrote there, that it was like, this is the most kind of risk-free it's going to be ever. And I was just wondering if you could kind of explain what your thought process was behind that.
Yeah, I think looking back on it, I went through uni just kind of eyes on the prize of like trying to get a good job at the end of uni. And when you kind of got there at the end and got on the grad scheme and were actually in it, like, I just found it hugely underwhelming. And Tom and I just shared that view. Yeah. Like, Tom was at Footsie and he was doing the finance sort of thing. I was at Mars doing chocolate. Chocolate to beer, just killing people in different ways. But just found it very underwhelming and not fun. Not fun at all. And being in a big blue chip, just the pace of things is really, really slow. It takes a long time to get things done. There's a lot of office politics that end up taking more of your time than actually getting work done, sort of chatting to people who you might want a placement with in the future, and making sure the perception of you internally is really strong, and kind of just like personal PR. Okay. Did more marketing of probably myself than I did of Maltesers whilst I was there. And I think the other thing is just like the process is relatively... it's kind of too much. Like, it's very claustrophobic. And there's a process to everything. So if you have an idea for how something could be done differently or better or in a more exciting way, it often just gets shot down. So I think I just got sort of fed up of swimming against the tide and trying to make stuff happen in an environment where it's not easy to just make big change happen. And Tom and I have always had the entrepreneurial flair since we were growing up, and sold sweets, washed cars, cut grass, delivered papers, like done everything you could to make a bit of money. And I think both of us felt that sort of tension in a big company, where being a sort of real entrepreneur at heart is not necessarily that helpful, because it goes against the grain of essentially what those big companies are, which big beasts, and they're great at what they do, but it's very different to
and if you
to
don't
small
fit
startups.
in, you don't fit in, and you sort of want to, and you did want to sort of create your own way and your own method.
Yeah, I think you can just ruffle some feathers as well, because if you try and do things a bit too quickly, if you try and sort of pressure people, and like my development area at Mars was an overplayed drive for results, and I was like, what do you mean? They were like, well, you're essentially too driven. I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's intimidating to other people. It's it pisses a few people off, and it's sort of like, is that really like the sort of environment you're in, where you got to tread on eggshells about everything? And you know, I didn't fit in, essentially. It was sort of a square peg, round hole. And I don't have a bad word to say about Mars as a business. I thought it was a brilliant business. And I think...
just didn't suit you.
Yeah, exactly.
More than anything.
Yeah, it wasn't you. It was me.
It was them. No, it wasn't. It was still you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
What was how did you go about that? What was the conversation like? Because you've been there for a while, right? By the time you end up quitting.
Yeah, I did 2 years on the grad scheme. So it was 3 years grad scheme, 12-month placement. So I did my first 2. I was about to start my third one.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it all changed pretty quickly, because as Tom and I were doing these events over the summer, we just said, like, if we can sell 5,000 beers over the summer, let's quit our jobs and do this full time. And we hadn't sold them all by the time I had to hand in my notice, but we were getting through them pretty quick, and we were selling out at every festival we went to. And just over the course of a weekend, was chatting to Tom and just said, actually, I think I'm going to quit my job. And Tom was like, yeah, I think I might do the same. And went in on Monday, handed in my notice, and had sort of done it before I really thought about it. And then again, there was sort of no going back.
Is that by any chance after a couple of beers as well?
Not on site, no. Alcohol's banned on Mars' site, but yeah, probably still had a little bit in my system from the weekend.
And what did those around you say when you came up to them and said, look, I'm thinking about leaving my graduate scheme? What was their reaction to that?
I think generally it was really, really supportive. I think if I'd turned around and said I'm off to Unilever or Coca-Cola, it probably would have been a different conversation and probably would have been shown the door straight away. But I think given it was doing something completely different, and it was, I sort of framed it to them as, this is something I've always wanted to do. Yeah. Like, if I don't sort of scratch this itch now, like, I'll always kind of regret it. And chatted to a couple of sort of key people within the business who'd supported me either through coaching or being mentors through my time there, and they were really supportive. They just said, yeah, go for it. Like, you got to take the chance to do it now, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, you'll always find a job. Like, you're not going to go through the rest of your life not being able to get a job. So, I found them really, really supportive, and especially the sales and marketing directors who were kind of heads of the functions that I was working in or going from and to in my placements. They're both very supportive of it, and I've actually stayed in touch with both of them since.
That is actually super interesting, because I was wondering if it was like, this was the worst experience of my life, I hated this grad scheme. So would you recommend a grad scheme to Henry Martin, who's currently looking for a job?
I can consult you on how to get a job at Mars. My first placement was in recruitment.
You haven't got any jobs going at the Jubël, have you? No? 3?
No pay. Terrible hours.
We're in.
I feel there's such a pressure to kind of shoot for a graduate scheme. I feel everyone at university is either looking for it whilst they're there, or as soon as they leave, they're it's the only option, really.
100%.
So it's very interesting to hear your take on it, because you've taken almost a completely different route by leaving your scheme.
Yeah, I think with the grad schemes in general, like, whether you do it or you don't, like, I just think whatever path you go down, you're going to learn something.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
In a big corporation, you'll learn probably how to be, if you do a general management grad scheme, probably how to be a GM of a big business, and huge focus on people skills, huge focus on personal development, and getting the best out of others around you. And if you go work for a startup after uni, you'd probably be a lot more hands-on, probably doing a lot more of the doing. Yeah. So you'd probably be functionally more equipped, whereas if you do a grad scheme, you might be sort of generally more equipped as a more of a people leader, but different skill sets. I think it just comes down to you and what you want to do, and thinking about maybe where you want to go in the future, and just sort of working back from that, like, what might be the best path where I can learn the most to get there. Yeah. But I thought that might be for me, realised it wasn't when I got in. Tom thought the same, and other people are different. I stay in touch with the other grads who were on the grad scheme, and they're all in really good jobs now. They finished the scheme, and they're doing really well, and they love it. So, yeah, it's different horses, different courses, but, yeah, for me, it just wasn't really the right thing.
Yeah.
And then moving on to actually when you had taken that plunge and you were sort of half unemployed, half self-employed, how did you actually find that first day of sort of, hi, I'm Jesse Wilson and I own my own company and that's my job now?
I'm not sure I've ever said that to anyone, but
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should start saying that a bit more.
Maybe that's where the investment comes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, the first day Tom and I were on it full time, we literally just sat down. I think we were in his girlfriend's flat in Balham. And we were sat there at the kitchen table and like, what on earth do we do now? Like, we've got this a bit wrong. We've jumped in far too quick. But yeah, we swiftly kind of work out what do we need to do. And you swiftly start to become a bit more, like you were saying, Ross, like quite confident in what you're offering and just kind of backing yourself a bit more, because there's no safety net once you're in full time. So if you don't kind of connect with people and just get credibility across quite quickly, then a lot of doors can close. So I think more out of necessity than anything, you kind of got to get that confidence pretty swiftly, either talking to suppliers or potential wholesalers or even retailers, and then eventually the consumer side of things, that you got to quite quickly communicate what you're doing and do that in a compelling way. So I think the confidence came with time. I think working out actually what we needed to do to get there took a little bit more time, but yeah, a bit of an unsettling, scary experience at the start.
Were there any sort of sleepless nights that you had at that point, or have had at any point during your journey?
Yeah, well, Tom and I always laugh because I'm a great sleeper. I fall asleep anywhere at any time, and Tom's a terrible sleeper. So
Yes.
I don't think it has anything to do with how the business is going. But I think in terms of some sort of crunch points, some stresses, like the lowest point was probably coming up to Christmas 2016, so just over a year ago. Because we had quit our jobs, we were doing it full time. We were trying to line up some investment. We were trying to line up some wholesalers as our route to market. We still needed a bigger contract manufacturer to work with instead of just a microbrewery. And all those things were so interlinked. You know, investors wanted to know how you're going to make the product, how you're going to sell it, which is completely fair enough. People we were talking to about making the product wanted to know, do you have investment in the cash flow to support production runs so that you're not just going to run off with the beer and not pay us? And then wholesalers and different routes to market, they wanted to know, well, how are you going to make your product? Where are we actually going to supply it from? Yeah. And also, how are you going to support the sales? Because we're not going to buy a pallet off you for you to not support it and then us just sit on stock that's going to gather dust. So at Christmas time, to answer your question, we were kind of stuck in that limbo phase between the three of those two things. Three of those two things? That doesn't make sense. The three of those things.
That's quick maths.
Yeah, exactly. That's just about as good as my maths gets. And we just couldn't really see a way through it. And it was Christmas time and people were busy and they didn't want to speak to us. And when we got to that Christmas, I think that probably was the lowest point, because we were thinking we're doing as much as we can, but this is out of our control to an extent. And that was the point where it's like, if I was ever going to lose any sleep, I probably would have lost it then.
And in that kind of run up to Christmas, was there ever a point where you and Tom were close to quitting, or have you always, in that, even throughout that period, thought, right, we're going to just see this through and just see where it takes us?
No, quitting's never really crossed our minds. We maybe irrationally so. Our parents probably would have hoped we were dusting off the CV, but no, never really thought of quitting. Just we knew what we needed to do. You know, we knew those three things we needed to get in place. They were kind of fundamentals. And yeah, I guess we were just blindly ignorant and just continuing to bang our heads against the wall to try and make those three things happen. And just kept going, really. I think fortunes changed a little bit in January because it's a new year. People get Christmas behind them. Everyone's got a lot less on their plate, and it's a really good time to sort of engage with customers, suppliers, investors, especially coming up to the end of the tax year. So that was kind of the change of things. It wasn't really anything we did. It was a new year, and I guess people were a little bit more open to having conversations.
And then, so throughout that period, how were you kind of sustaining yourself through that time? So you've quit your job. What month did you quit the grad scheme?
September 2016.
So between September and January, when it started getting better, were you making money at this point, or was this just scraping the barrel?
Yeah, not so much. No, No, I went back to my parents, you know, did the cliche, like, went back to my parents. I didn't sleep on the floor. I had a bed. But yeah, I was doing relatively unglamorous thing back there. Tom was sort of sofa surfing around different places in London because he's from Cornwall. So, yeah, we were both trying to just keep our costs to a minimum because we weren't making anything from the business because we weren't, well, we couldn't make products, so we couldn't sell it. We didn't have any money to do either. So, yeah, we both had to do a little bit on the side. We both saved up a little bit of money, and that was actually starting to get pretty low as well by Christmas time. So, yeah, we weren't earning at that point. I guess that was another pressure on the side. It was sort of like, how long can we keep sustaining ourselves without having an income?
Jesse, in terms of having your business partner, Tom, alongside you, who you obviously met at university and you consider a good friend, how have you felt that dynamic has either helped the business or helped your friendship, or obviously sort of the reverse? Has it ever sort of stood in the way of having a proper business chat?
No, I think having a co-founder has been the best thing about doing Jubël. Tom and I say it all the time, like being able to work with one of your best mates on something you really enjoy doing is amazing. Like you guys will, I'm sure, say the same thing. It's such good fun. It's such good fun just being able to spend a lot of time actually working on something and being productive about it. And for Tom and I, like, you're there to, you know, you have bad days. Like if one of you has a bad day, you've got someone to balance it out. And there are days in the summer where, you know, you're going out and seeing 15, 20 customers in a day. You're cold calling 20 customers. You might get 20 no's. But instead of like driving back and thinking, I need to quit this business and start doing something else, you can just like phone each other up and go, oh, I just had the worst day. Like, do people actually like Jubël? Like 20 people said no. And then Tom's on the other end of the phone going, I had the best day ever. I went and saw 12 customers and I got 10 of them. Like 80, 90% hit rate today. Unbelievable. And you can just balance each other out. So I think on a sort of like steady emotion level, like if someone has a high, the other person's probably having a low. So you can really just balance it out. And I don't think it's ever got in the way for us. Like I think because we're such good friends, like you never overthink anything. Like when you're having a conversation with each other, you're not thinking about how do I need to frame this in a way that they're not going to take it too personally. Like you literally just speak your mind. And we've never had a falling out. Like we disagree on stuff sometimes because that's healthy. And like, oh, actually, no, like I think that looks really good. And there's always a reason to that. And it's like, yeah, actually, you're right. So it doesn't mean there's no disagreements, but we never like have any conflict, which is a real difference. So, you know, we have healthy disagreements. We're often actually always on the same page with stuff as well, which is quite ironic. But when there are stuff that we disagree on, we never overthink the conversations, and it's just very, very natural. Whereas I actually felt in like another job working, you know, on a grad scheme or in a big corporate, you got to be really careful about how you have conversations with people, because you might be worried about like putting their nose out of joint, or, you know, potentially offending someone, or, you know, you don't want to upset them. But it's just completely different with a best mate, because you're not really thinking about what you're saying, you just say it, and you've got that underlying level of trust. So yeah, best thing ever having a co-founder.
And then how about when you sort of got your break? Sort of explain what the break was, and then how your fortunes sort of picked up and the business moved forward.
Yeah, I think the turning point was something we never really could have planned for. As we sort of said, in the run up to Christmas, we were focused on what we needed to do. You know, we were as planned as we could have been, but nothing was really changing. So things kind of changed in Jan sort of time, 2017. We what went first? I think it was probably, well, all three things kind of came together at once. But we were speaking to a chap who was a connection of a friend of ours, and he had been really helpful over the course of a couple of years, just giving us advice on a startup business, because he had a career in drinks, both corporate side and sort of more startup side. And we were asking him all the basic questions at the beginning, like, you know, how do you find a contract manufacturer, all the way through to more sort of technical and slightly more strategic stuff toward the end. But because he had been there throughout, we were continuing to chat to him probably on a quarterly basis, just having a Skype call or something and running some questions past him. And in the January time, we were starting to get together a full business plan for investment. And because we were waiting on things like production costs, which is kind of a fundamental for, your business plan, and then we didn't know what our route to market was. So, for instance, we could have been selling to wholesalers at a given price, but if we sold direct to pubs, we would have made more money. So the whole business plan kind of hinged on these things of like, how are we going to make the product, how are we going to sell it? But as those things started to come together, we could put a business plan together. And we sent it across to him and just said, can you basically have a good look through this, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and just grill us on anything that jumps out as a bit of a loophole, anything that you would naturally want to know a bit more about, anything that you would question. And he went on a call with us. He explained sort of any gaps he thought there were, and gave us a chance to sort of have a conversation about it. It was really relaxed. We just had a chat, really. And we were on the phone for, a couple of hours, 2-3 hours. And he actually said at the end, like, actually, I'd really like to invest in this business. And we were like, bloody hell, that's class. Like, we didn't really see that coming. And
could have said that at the start of the conversation.
Yeah, probably would have been under a bit more pressure if he said that. But he turned around and sort of expressed an interest in investing, which was great. And then we were in latter stage conversations by that point with a contract manufacturer. So when we could go to them and say, actually, we've got an investor, this is how much we're looking to raise, and this is our plan for how we're going to turn that investment into investment behind the brand and actually grow this thing. We had a yes from the brewery, which was the second key thing. And then those two things really came together for wholesalers. And we just drew a line around the map for sort of Cornwall to begin with, and looked at who are the key wholesalers down in Cornwall, who do we kind of need to work with to get access to the market. And there's a company called St Austell Brewery down there, and another one called LWC. And they were a couple of wholesalers who kind of give you access to 90% of the bar and pub trade in Cornwall. And when we could go to those guys and say, we've got some investment behind the brand, we've got a contract manufacturer to supply us, we got yeses from them. So that's how it kind of all came together. But as I said, we couldn't have planned for it at all. It was, it was kind of like one thing to the next, and it all fell into place at a very convenient time, but in a way that we really couldn't have planned for.
I was going to actually, you kind of mentioned it there, that you specifically looked at Cornwall as the sort of centre of the early growth. What was the reason behind that? Was it because of like the brand and sort of where it had come from, or was it just because Tom's from there, or both? Like, what was the thinking behind that?
Tom is there, so there was, I guess, the practical piece of we can probably find somewhere to live pretty cheap down in Cornwall. But I think we were just thinking, time of year, it was March time, we're coming into summer. Cornwall's obviously a great place during the summer. And we just thought about London's so competitive, like, shall we go for a bit more white space? And we'd spoken to a few people in the industry and people who knew a lot more about what they were talking about than we did. And their advice to us was go somewhere to get a bit of a case study under your belt where it's maybe a bit less competitive. And especially in our industry, beer, cider, spirits, the whole alcohol industry, a lot of companies pay to play. So in exclusive bars in London, you might pay 15 grand just to get them to stock your product. And given its low margin industry, you might make 30p per bottle of beer that you're selling. You're looking at getting on for 50,000 bottles before you've broken even on an account. So for us, that just didn't make any sense at all. So we were thinking, actually, let's go for a bit of white space. Tom was from Falmouth, so we just thought Cornwall feels right. And then because we could get the wholesalers on board, that kind of gave us access to the market. So I don't think we put a huge amount of thought into it, to be honest. I think we just thought, Cornwall, that'd be decent. Cornwall in the summer would be even more fun, and just kind of moved down and went for it.
I think that's accidentally then fitted like perfectly, because if you look at like the branding and even the story behind it is kind of that outdoor sports sort of thing, which I feel like in the whole of the country is sort of associated with that area as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you reminded me of another reason why we actually moved down there. I probably should have said that. Oh yeah, the brand. Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. There was a lifestyle element to it of actually in Cornwall you can enjoy the beach. Like, it's a great outdoors. It's a bit more chilled. It's not like hectic big city London, full on in your face. And I think we just thought, to start seeding the brand, that's a bit more of an on-brand place to do it. And if we can get some bar and pub accounts in some of the key places in Cornwall, great place to sort of come across what is a light and slightly more refreshing beer. It's probably suited to the beach side, and we just thought that was a good brand reason to do it as well. So good prompt.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, because if that was an
want a job?
accident, I really do. If that was an accident, that was like a big coincidence, I think.
It sort of was, but it sort of wasn't.
Moving forward, would you look to sort of just start spreading the area that you supply?
Yeah, so we distributed in Cornwall over the summer, kind of May to September time, and I think what we've had to get a little bit better at over time is just realising stuff takes so much longer to do than you think it will. So, we underestimated how long it would take to actually get this off the ground. We then underestimated the drop-off that would happen in Cornwall post-summer, but we underestimated it less than we did previously. So we were getting better. Yeah. So we're improving every time. But in August was kind of the first time Tom and I sat down for a bit of a planning day and said, September, October time, tourists disappear. Like, Tom grew up in Cornwall, he knows what the market's like. And the weather gets pretty bleak, and no one goes to the beach, let alone Cornwall as a county. So we sat down in August and we looked at what are we going to do come September time, definitely October time, because we need to continue growing our distribution and get the top line continuing to go up. But that's not going to happen by just continuing to do what we're doing down here. So we looked at the geography of distribution that our wholesalers had, and Synos will cover all the way up to sort of Bristol, Bath area as well. So we just thought Bristol, Bath, next to Plymouth, they were 4 bigger cities that are busy all year round, probably busier through the 8 months of the year that aren't the summer months, just because there's a few, I think there are 9 unis between those 4 or 5 cities, and that's obviously a huge influx of people a similar sort of age to our target market, and just as a result, lots of events happening through the winter, a lot more sort of vibrant scene in those cities. And so we pretty much, metaphorically tossed the coin. We're just like, well, Bristol and Bath kind of come together, Exeter and Plymouth come together. What do you want to do? What shall I do? And Tom just said, well, I'll take Exeter if you want. And then I was like, sweet, I'll do Bristol. So, started distributing into to Bristol and Bath, Exeter and Plymouth from September time. And that was the plan for the last 4 months. And now we're just really looking at plans to start scaling our distribution more nationally. And we're sort of at a crunch point of, do you continue to do that through a wholesale route to market or more through a distribution route to market, which we had no idea what that was 2 months ago. But starting to get our heads around it and trying to work out what the best thing is for the brand.
So what's the reception been like in Bristol, Bath, Plymouth? Good reception?
Yeah, it's been really good. It's good for us to sort of take the summer and learn where does it really work, where does it not work, and we quite quickly worked out. I mean, it wasn't rocket science, but if it's a beach bar that's full of people who are 25 to 35, often it works really well, and we get a really high rate of sale. If it's a real ale pub in the middle of the countryside in Cornwall, we'll probably only sell a case maybe a month, like hugely low rate of sale, like 3 bottles a week. So not really worth our time. So that was quite helpful coming into new places and being able to just target places a lot more, just be a bit more focused. So instead of kind of going for the throw everything at the wall approach and try and just see what stuck, we were a bit more targeted and picked off kind of 10, 15 key accounts and tried to get them on board first, and realise that that's the place we need to be in to get to our target market. All 4 cities have been good. Like Bristol, that's a pretty booming beer scene. Like there's a lot of craft brands in Bristol and a lot of startup breweries in Bristol. So a lot of pubs in Bristol have reps coming in like 5 times a day. So they get a little bit sick of seeing you. But once they realise it's actually your own brand, they're a little bit more open to talking than just being a general salesperson.
In terms of targeting universities, is that something that you really sort of put down to your age, which can often be a barrier to creating your own business? But in this case, would you say it was a massive positive?
We didn't really target the unis as such. I think the thought process was kind of, firstly, like where's busy from now on. Then the second thing was, can we actually access that market? Because if we just said, well, we need to be in London, all sort of well and good on paper, but then you're starting from scratch again. Like, you need a wholesaler to get product to bars and pubs. Otherwise, you're delivering it yourself, which we're not geared up to do. So that was sort of the second thing. It was like, where do our wholesalers cover? And then the third thing was kind of like, okay, within that, where do our target market, target demographic kind of drink beer and drink cider? And they happen to be cities where there are unis. We didn't really explicitly target unis because it's, as you guys will know, and as we knew from the past, like, it's a time where you don't have like a load of spare cash, and our question at the bar always used to be like, what deals have you got on? Like, what's your cheapest drink? And I think it's really hard to build a premium brand image and establish a brand image when the question behind it is like, what's your cheapest drink? And if the answer to that's Jubël, like, you're probably not going to be a great brand. So Carlsberg and Somersby, not to like drop a minute, but like, there'll often be a couple of pints on draft that are really affordable because they can afford to do it, because they can produce it so cheap. For us, we just couldn't do that. So if we can't compete on price, we're going to have to establish a really premium brand image and just warrant, like, why would someone pay a bit more for this? And I think if you go everywhere and start seeing it on discount, you're never going to want to pay like £4.50 a bottle for it. So yeah, we actually kind of actively steer clear of the uni market in terms of the marketing. Like, not to say, uni students can't drink our product. It's just, it's very hard to establish a bit of a premium image around it with people who are so price conscious. So yeah, look to the sort of one step up on the social ladder from that, which is kind of starting at young professional and going up until people get a little bit boring and get a house and a mortgage and settle down a bit.
Okay, Jesse, we kind of skimmed over it earlier in terms of creating your beer and coming from a limited background at the start, like you said. What was that process like in deciding upon your final beer?
Yeah, that took quite a long time, actually. From that first day in the pub where Tom and I decided we were actually going to do something about Jubël, we had no idea how to make beer at all, let alone a peach one. Yeah. So it was probably 2 years from that point until May 2017 when we actually got to what we launched into market full time. Yeah. So that journey started with phoning up some suppliers saying, we want to make a beer. We Google brewery, phone up a brewery. Yeah. We want to make a beer. They were like, oh, what, you want to contract brew it? And we're like, okay, cool, write that down. Contract brew, phone up the next one. We're looking for contract brewing services. Can you help us out? Yeah. What's your minimum run? What do you mean? Like, well, how many do you need us to make? I don't know, like a couple hundred bottles. We're like, oh, okay, well, our minimum run's 10,000 bottles. We're like, oh, okay. And then other people would be like, our minimum run's 60 barrels. And we're like, what's a barrel? Google that. A barrel is X many litres, X many bottles. So over the course of many conversations, like we sort of started to work out the chat that we needed to like actually get through a phone call rather than them just put the phone down on us and be like, is this a prank call? Yeah. But eventually we would speak to some brewers and they would say, yeah, that sounds interesting. Like, we could probably help you do a trial batch. We could probably help you brew something. So we went and visited a couple of microbreweries. First one we visited was in the depths of Cornwall. It was basically in a shed. We were like, no, we're not making our beer here. And then we sort of finally found a brewery where they could make, a trial brew for us, but we still didn't really know anything about beer. So we started playing around on their kit, started messing around with some peach brews, and kind of all the flavour gets lost through the brew process with real peaches in the mash. Yeah. And then all the sugars that are left, they all turn to alcohol. So we just had something at the end that was really strong and tasted terrible. So it was sort of back to the drawing board, like how do we make a peach beer? Because we just thought, well, you've got to put peaches into beer. And what comes out the other side is a peach beer. It's not quite as easy as that. So we then approached a flavouring house. So we said to them, look, we need to make a peach beer. We took this cordial along with us, made them a demi-pêche, and we're like, we want it to taste like that. Can you help us? Said it's got to be all natural, like that's a complete non-negotiable. Can't haze the beer, it can't start to become a cloudy lager, like no lagers sort of hazy or cloudy. Okay. Don't want to put people off by how it looks. And then it can't be like a J2O, like you can't have this sediment on the bottom that you've got to shake up to get it mixed up. Like open a beer, it's going to explode in your face. And then we said it also can't separate, like can't be like salad dressing where you've got this flavouring like sat as the inch on top of your beer and you've got to tip it upside down. So not many criteria. But that's obviously such like plain English. Like we didn't know any of the lingo, any of the jargon. We were telling them we didn't want it to be like salad dressing. They said, like we can help you out. We've got lots of, food and beverage flavouring applications. We were like, sweet. So they helped us with the development on the flavouring side of things. And they said, well, where's your beer? Like you need to obviously have the application that you're going to add the flavouring to. And we didn't have the beer because this other beer that we had was terrible. So we just used a generic, like off-the-shelf beer to kind of get the flavouring composition right. So like right amount of flavouring compared to the beer. So it wasn't too peachy. It wasn't not peachy enough and went for a lot of iterations to get to something that was quite well balanced. And then it was sort of back to the drawing board of like, well, how do we now make the beer? Because we got the flavouring sorted to infuse the beer with at the back end of the lager process, but now we've got to work out how to make some beer. That was probably the bit that took the longest. As I said before, finding a contract manufacturer was really difficult. And it took us a good 8 months to find someone who their minimum orders weren't too high, but at the same time they had enough sort of quality accreditations and they're a big enough supplier so that we could go to wholesalers and retailers and they could be confident that what we're making is going to be consistent every time. It's not going to change between brews. And when we finally started working with them, we, to be honest, we did a trial brew, but we had already committed to our wholesalers that we were going to deliver product on a certain date. So the brew had to be good enough to get to the wholesalers because we didn't have a backup plan. Unfortunately, it was. So, that was kind of the May 2017 point where we finally had this brew. We had developed a brew spec and we had obviously got the flavouring composition compared to how much beer we were going to use. And kind of came out the other side, tasted it, and we were like, decent. That's turned out relatively well. So we did put quite a lot of work into it. I don't mean to make it seem like we didn't really think about it, but because we didn't really know anything about the brewing process, we started from nothing. So I actually skipped over something that was really helpful in between, which was a brew consultant that we worked with. Because we didn't have a supplier, but what they could do is kind of translate your stupid questions into something that was actually helpful for brewing. So we would sit around a table like this and say, we want a beer that's sort of this colour, and it sort of tastes, like a nice malty aftertaste, and nothing technical to our chat at all. And they got out this colour chart, and they were like, okay, so you want it to be 8 on the EBC scale, and we're like, what's the EBC? And like, what does number 8 mean? And then, they'd be like, well, it's that sort of colour. And we were like, that feels about right. Yeah, that's a nice golden yellow. And they'd be like, okay, well, you just need to have this, 90% lager malt, 5% caramel, like 5% pale malt. And we were like, sweet, happy days.
It's like going into B&Q and just mixing your own paint, but for beer.
It was, but without knowing what paint is. That was really helpful actually in between, like developing the brew spec. Because those guys, they helped us translate stupid questions into something that, when we took that to a brewer, they were like, this is really good. Like, this actually shows us how to make a beer. Because we had never made that, we didn't know what it was going to taste like. So there was some method in the madness, but there was still a little bit of risk at the end when we needed to get it into market. Because it was coming up to summertime, we just had to get going and get out there. But given beer takes 4 weeks to make, we couldn't really get it wrong.
Exactly,
Was there a reason you went purely bottles, or did you ever consider the can or draft route? But I would imagine putting it on draft for a peach beer would be slightly tricky.
Yeah, so funnily enough, the first thought we had was we're going to be a draft product, because that just feels like really easy. We'll just make some kegs and you just pour some pints. Like, how hard can that be? So that's what we were actually planning to do. And then the main driver behind that was we didn't think bottles were going to be feasible, because most breweries we were speaking to at the time, they were saying, we can make your beer, we could keg it off, but we don't have a bottling plant. Okay. You'll have to contract bottle it, so ship your beer from us to a contract bottler. Their lead times are like 10 weeks because they're really busy. And a bit of a closed-minded response, but Tom and I were just like, that sounds like too much admin. Let's not bottle the beer, let's keg it. And then we ended up speaking to a manufacturer who had a bottling line. So then we were like, actually, bottles would be much better. We'd rather do bottles if we could. We just didn't think it was feasible. So we ended up going into bottles and kind of didn't go down the draft route. When we looked into draft in a bit more detail as well, we realised how complicated and expensive draft is. Without getting too technical, like the installation costs, you've got to... often you might have to install your own draft font, so the actual thing that is dispensing your beer, you might have to get someone to put that in. You're going to have to get the systems linked up to your keg. You're going to probably have to pay someone a fee to use the lines. So sometimes you'll go in, and in a bar there's just like a generic draft font that have got like 5 different labels on it. There are companies out there who own those lines, and the brands rent them off the line companies. So essentially you're having to pay rent to actually be there. So for us, like, those amongst a number of other things about, like, kegs go missing, people don't get them back to you, they're expensive. We just thought actually keg is not that economical. We moved beyond thinking actually that's just too much admin. We had looked into doing it, but just wasn't very economical. And also we spoke to some retailers, like bars and pubs, and they said, well, for us to put you on draft, you're going to have to sell as many kegs a week as what I'm taking off to put you in. But if it's 12 beers in a case, I can put those in the fridge, see how they sell, and if they're slow, it doesn't really matter because I'm not really taking anything out to put you guys in it. It was just much more flexible and easy for them to give something a go. So we actually found, like, in terms of opening doors for retailers, it was a much easier format to be in. And we're actually looking at can at the moment as the final format, because a lot of events we did over the summer, they were no glass policy, and pouring bottles out is, one, a massive waste of packaging, and two, just a pain in the arse. And also cans would be much better for supermarkets where natural light isn't good for any sort of product. So can blocks that, and bottles don't. So if they're sitting on a supermarket shelf, it's actually probably better for the quality of our product if we go into cans. So yeah, we've done a bit of thinking about format. We're never going to go into draft. We don't see ourselves as a draft product, but cans and bottles are the plan.
So is supermarket part of the goal then?
Yeah, definitely at some stage. I think if you look at the numbers for the industry as a whole, like last time I looked, it was about 80-20 split between off-trade, which would be anywhere you buy it and don't drink it on site, and on-trade, which, on premise. So we at the moment have only done on-trade. We've been exclusively on-trade. So we're kind of capping ourselves at 20% of the alcohol market by doing that. Obviously, the main challenge is supermarkets have the buying power, and especially the big ones. So you need to kind of justify why you want that space on shelf, and why you're going to sell more in that space than another brand, because they just see it as real estate as well, and what's going to give me the highest rate of return in that allocated space that I give you. So we need to build up a little bit of demand first, more widely than just in Cornwall in the southwest, to start working with supermarkets. But it will be at the point where people start going into supermarkets and asking it, and hopefully they actually come to us, where it will be like the sort of time that we'll be thinking about going into the off-trade, because there'll just be a little bit more room for us to justify a certain price point, because they want us as well as us obviously wanting to be there. But at the moment it's it's sort of 100% us, maybe 99% us, 1% them. We'd like to be a bit more 50-50.
And have there been, because you were saying obviously you couldn't put it on draft, so it had to be bottles, but you go into a pub and the bottles are kind of a foot lower than everything else and you can't really see what's there. So how have you been able to advertise that so people actually go and buy it, especially if they don't know what it is?
Yeah, no, really good question. I think generally, like when I used to hear the word marketing, I had no idea what it meant. And I think we've started to get our heads around like what actually is marketing, because we've had to sort of work out what works for the brand and how we drive demand for the product. And we sort of split it into brand marketing and customer marketing. And what your question was really relating to what we talk about as like customer marketing. Because it's anything within the bar or pub environment to try and influence why someone might buy the product. So because, as you said, it's a bottle and it sits in a fridge and it's hard to see, hasn't got much visibility, we'll do basically three things. Like, first thing we try and do is always do a bit of a session with the bar staff in the places we're stocked. So if they know how to pronounce it, they've tasted it before, they know a bit about the story, how it's made. If someone comes to the bar and says, like, have you got anything you would recommend? If we can be the first thing that they do recommend, then that's great. That gets people to try it. And then we've just got to back the product that they'll go back and buy it again. Yeah. Second thing we try and do is sampling, as I said, as much as we can. And we'll try and do that within pub and bar environments. So we'll find out, when are your busy times during the week, when do you get a lot of footfall, and on something like a Friday night, we'll go and do some samples in a bar and just get chatting to people and saying, do you want to try a new beer? Get into a conversation with them. And there, so many times you get asked the really stupid question, where can I buy this? And you're like, well, here, that's why we're here at the bar. So that has really good conversion for sales, because people are like, oh, great. And they go buy bottles and walk past you holding it up like, hey, I bought it. You're like, you don't have to patronize us. But the third thing we do is it's point of sale. So, if a staff member's working behind the bar who we haven't talked to before and we're not there sampling, which we can't be all the time, is there something there that kind of just jogs people's memory a bit about we're in the fridge? And it sort of relies more on them having come across the brand in the past and more just being a trigger for them. But we'll do like some bespoke chalkboards, like just sort of die cut in our mountain shape, and they've got a bottle holder in. And if we can get one of those on the back bar, like it just jogs people's memory a bit and just disrupts their decision making at the bar a little bit. And if it catches their eye and they think, oh, Jubël, they got Jubël here, I didn't know they had it, then it might again just influence them purchasing it. But those are the three things we do like inside the bar environment, so sort of from a customer marketing standpoint. And then like brand marketing, the other side to our marketing is it's more how have we influenced someone's likelihood that they're going to buy the product before they get there. And that's what we'll do through events, PR, and social media for the most part.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And looking at kind of point of sales, have you considered or thought about having branding on the top of your bottle caps as a pushing factor to potentially get more sales, or is that something that you've consciously decided against?
No, I think we got the plain ones on there right now just because to print them you've got to do 400,000 at once. They're mega cheap per unit, but you have to order loads. So we just wanted to wait to do our branding in a more sort of holistic sense. And as I said, we're working on some branding behind the scenes. So we were just waiting until that point to do it all at once. But yeah, I don't think what's on the top of a bottle really influences whether someone's going to buy it or not. But I guess it does make you look like a more complete brand and a bigger brand. So yeah, we'll go for that at some stage.
It is a bit weird if you think about it, because you just pop it straight off and then start drinking
it.
But all three of us noticed as well, I think, sort of to some extent, just because we were probably overthinking it anyway. We were like inspecting it rather than just seeing it just to drink.
I think it sort of links to our market approach as well, because I said we've only been in pubs and bars so far. No one ever sees the cap because the bar staff open it up. So it doesn't really play a role at all for us. And given we're looking to go into cans in the off-trade anyway, no one would probably ever see it. But yeah, we will brand them at some stage, just because once you're at enough economies of scale, it's the same cost as a plain one anyway.
Yeah, that's the main reason that we would have noticed, because we bought a crate of Jubël last week. So we sort of had 12 of them staring at us in the face.
Market
Someone's
research, that is. Market research.
So, Jesse, with thoughts moving to wrapping today's really great session 2 up, is there one piece of advice that you'd give to any aspiring entrepreneur who happens to be a millennial, who's thinking, I've been told that I have to get the graduate job, I have to do this, have to sort of tick the boxes, but has that burning desire to just go, no, I want to make my own way and my own method?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think either Tom or I feel very qualified to be dishing out advice yet, because we're still newbies ourselves and ask more questions than we get asked. So all we can really speak about is sort of from our experience what might have been useful to know at the start. I would say, like, do it with someone else, because it's one, more fun, and two, I think just better like business practice.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that about wraps up our time. A huge thank you very much for Jesse for coming onto the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And just be sure to check out Jubël's website and social media, which will be in the description. Thank you all for listening. I've been Henry Martin.
I've been Ross Jeffries.
And for as long as I can remember, I've been Tom West.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed session number 2 of the Bull Sessions, where we were joined by Jesse Wilson from Jubël Beer.
We would be really grateful if you could leave us a review and a rating on iTunes. Unless it's not very nice, then you can keep that to yourself.
We're in the early days of the pod, so all ratings and reviews will go a long way to helping us get off the ground.
Be sure to find us on Instagram at The Bull Sessions and search The Bull Sessions on Facebook to find us there too.
If you want to drop us an email, get us at thebullsessionspod@gmail.com.
See you later.
The Bull Sessions. The Bull Sessions. The Bull Sessions.